Good evening. Do you remember the first time you saw her smile on the silver screen? Which movie was it? Was it Gentlemen Prefer Blondes? Some Like It Hot? Or perhaps one of her earlier films, when she was still finding her way in this world of lights and cameras? I want you to think about that moment right now. Close your eyes if you need to. Remember that feeling, that warmth, that radiance that seemed to pour right through the celluloid and into your heart. Please, share it with us in the comments below. Tell us which film it was and what you felt. Because tonight, we're going to remember her differently. We're going to remember the woman behind that smile, the gentle soul who walked among us for far too brief a time. Tonight, I want to take you back to a warm summer evening in 1958. The kind of evening when the California sky turns that particular shade of lavender and gold that makes you believe anything is possible. The kind of evening when the air itself seems to shimmer with promise and dreams. But this isn't a story about Hollywood glamour, though it starts there. This is a story about something much deeper, something much more precious. This is a story about the heart that beat beneath the fame, the gentle, generous, loving heart of a woman the world thought it knew, but perhaps never truly understood. Let me paint you a picture of that evening. The party was being held at one of those grand estates in Beverly Hills. You know the kind. The ones with driveways that wind up through manicured gardens, where every blade of grass seems to have been individually placed by some master gardener, where fountains cascade in the twilight and the sound of water mingles with the clink of crystal glasses and the practiced laughter of the beautiful people. The house itself was a palace, really. White columns rising 3 stories high, windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, blazing with golden light that spilled out onto marble terraces. Inside, the party was in full swing, and what a party it was! The guest list read like a who's who of Hollywood royalty. Producers in impeccably tailored tuxedos, directors holding court in leather wingback chairs, starlets in gowns that cost more than most people earned in a year. The champagne flowed like water. French champagne, naturally. The very best. It arrived in endless streams, carried on silver trays by white-gloved waiters who moved through the crowd like silent ghosts. The bubbles caught the light from the enormous crystal chandeliers overhead, creating tiny fireworks in each glass. The music was provided by a full orchestra. Can you imagine? Not a record player, not even a small band, but a complete orchestra tucked away in the corner of the grand ballroom. They played Cole Porter and George Gershwin. They played Irving Berlin and Jerome Kern. The kind of music that made you want to dance, even if you'd forgotten how. The kind of music that spoke of romance and moonlight and all the beautiful lies that Hollywood loved to tell. And there in the center of it all was Marilyn. She wore a dress that evening that would have made angels weep with envy. It was silver, catching every bit of light in the room and throwing it back multiplied 1,000 times. The fabric was silk, the finest silk, and it moved like liquid mercury when she walked. It hugged her famous figure in all the ways that had made her a star, in all the ways that the cameras loved. The neckline was modest by today's standards, but elegant, timeless. Around her throat she wore diamonds. Not too many, just enough. They sparkled with cold fire against her skin. Her hair was perfect, that platinum blonde that had become her signature, styled in those soft waves that framed her face like a halo. Her makeup was flawless. The red lips, the beauty mark, the eyes lined and shadowed to perfection. She looked exactly like what everyone expected Marilyn Monroe to look like. She looked like a movie star. She looked like a dream. But if you had looked closely, if you had really looked into those eyes, you would have seen something else, something the cameras rarely caught. A certain distance, a certain weariness, a longing for something that all the champagne and all the diamonds and all the adoration in the world could never provide. She smiled, of course. She laughed at the right moments. She posed for photographs with producers and directors and fellow actors. Flashbulbs popped like tiny explosions all around her, each one capturing that famous smile, each one freezing her in a moment of manufactured joy. She signed autographs on cocktail napkins. She accepted compliments with grace and humility. She played the role that was expected of her, the role that she had played so many times before, the role of Marilyn Monroe, superstar. But inside, something was pulling at her, a gentle tug on her heart, a whisper in her soul that grew louder with each passing moment. She had made a promise, you see. 3 days earlier, she had received a letter. Not a fan letter, though she received hundreds of those every week. This was different. This letter came from a nurse at St. Mary's Children's Hospital on the other side of the city. A kind woman named Margaret, who had written to explain that the children in the long-term care ward had been practicing reading, and they had asked, with all the innocent hope that only children possess, whether Marilyn Monroe might ever come to read them a story. Most celebrities would have passed such a request to their assistant, who would have sent a polite decline or perhaps a signed photograph. But Marilyn had read that letter 3 times, sitting in her dressing room, and each time she read it, she felt her heart break a little more. Children. Children who were sick. Children who had no one. Children who were spending their evenings in hospital beds instead of playing in backyards or being tucked in by loving parents. She had written back immediately, in her own hand, not typed by a secretary. She had told Nurse Margaret that yes, she would come. She would come on Saturday evening around 8 o'clock if that was suitable. She had asked what stories the children liked. She had asked their names and ages. She had cared enough to ask. And now it was Saturday evening, and she was standing in this palace of glass and marble and champagne, and all she could think about were those children. All she could think about was her promise. She glanced at her watch. It was a delicate thing, gold with a white face and slim hands that pointed to 7:15. She had 45 minutes. The hospital was across the city, a good 30-minute drive at this time of evening, maybe more. She waited for a moment when the crowd around her shifted, when attention turned elsewhere, toward some new arrival or some bit of gossip, and then, as quietly as a whisper, she slipped away. She moved through the grand house like a ghost, taking corridors that the guests didn't use, finding her way through the kitchen where the catering staff barely glanced up from their work. One cook, an older woman with kind eyes, did notice her. Their gazes met for just a moment, and the woman smiled and nodded, as if she understood perfectly, as if she knew that sometimes even stars need to escape. Marilyn smiled back, a real smile this time, not the practiced one she wore for cameras, and continued on. She found a side door that opened onto a small garden area, away from the main entrance where paparazzi and fans were still gathered. The evening air hit her face like a blessing. It was cooler out here, away from the press of bodies and the heat of the lights. She could breathe. Her car was parked some distance away, among the vehicles of the other guests. It wasn't the flashy convertible that the studio liked her to be photographed in. It was a simple sedan, black and understated, the kind of car that wouldn't draw attention. She had learned over the years the value of being able to move through the world unnoticed when she needed to. She slipped behind the wheel, and for a moment, she just sat there, her hands on the steering wheel, breathing. She could still hear the music from the party, faint now, drifting through the summer air. She could still see the lights blazing in every window of that grand house. She thought about all those people inside, all that glamour, all that glitter, and she thought about the children waiting for her across the city. There was no contest. She turned the key, and the engine came to life with a gentle purr. She eased the car down the long driveway, past the fountains and the perfectly manicured gardens, past the paparazzi who didn't even turn their heads because they were waiting for Marilyn Monroe, the movie star, not a woman in a simple black car. And then she was on the road, heading toward the other side of Los Angeles, heading toward what really mattered. The drive took her from the heights of Beverly Hills down into the city proper. As she descended, the landscape changed. The palatial estates gave way to ordinary neighborhoods. The manicured perfection gave way to real life. Apartment buildings and corner stores, diners and gas stations, laundromats with neon signs flickering in windows. This was the Los Angeles that most people knew. The Los Angeles where real people lived real lives.
Marilyn loved this Los Angeles. As she drove, she thought about her own childhood, about the foster homes and the orphanage, about being the little girl that nobody wanted, about lying in bed at night and dreaming that someday someone would come and choose her. Someone would come and say that she was special, that she was loved, that she mattered. She thought about all the nights she had spent alone, all the times she had felt invisible, all the times she had needed someone to care, and no one had been there. She understood these children. She understood them in a way that perhaps no one else in that glittering party could. She understood what it meant to be forgotten, to be overlooked, to be just another face in a crowd of faces, all of them waiting, hoping, praying for someone to notice. Well, she had noticed, and she was coming. The hospital appeared ahead, a large brick building 5 stories tall. It wasn't new, it wasn't fancy, but it was clean and well-maintained, and there were lights burning in almost every window. Lights that meant people were working, lights that meant people were caring, lights that meant hope. She pulled into the parking lot and found a space near the back, away from the main entrance. For a moment, she checked her appearance in the rearview mirror. The perfect hair, the perfect makeup, the diamonds at her throat. She hesitated, then reached up and carefully removed the diamond necklace. It seemed too much for this place, too showy, too Hollywood. She tucked it into her purse and looked again. Better. More like a woman, less like a movie star. She grabbed the shopping bag from the passenger seat. Earlier that week, she had gone to a bookstore, and she had spent 2 hours browsing the children's section. She had selected 6 books: The Velveteen Rabbit, Charlotte's Web, Where the Wild Things Are, Goodnight Moon, stories about love and friendship and belonging. Stories about being special exactly as you are. She had paid for them herself, not with studio money, and she had wrapped each one in simple brown paper with a ribbon. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car. The evening air had grown cooler. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of traffic. The city never really slept, did it? It just changed its rhythm. She walked toward the entrance, and with each step, she felt the weight of the day lifting from her shoulders. The exhaustion of being Marilyn Monroe, movie star, was being replaced by something else, something lighter, something pure, the joy of being Norma Jean, just a woman who wanted to make some children smile. The lobby of the hospital was quiet at this hour. Visiting hours were technically over, but Nurse Margaret had arranged everything. She was waiting near the information desk, a woman in her 50s with gray hair pinned back under her nurse's cap and a face that radiated warmth and competence. When she saw Marilyn, her eyes widened slightly, but to her credit, she didn't make a fuss. "Miss Monroe," she said quietly, extending her hand.
Thank you so much for coming." Marilyn took her hand and held it with both of hers. "Please," she said, "call me Marilyn. And thank you for writing to me. I've been looking forward to this all week." And she had, genuinely, truly, in a way that she hadn't looked forward to the party, in a way that she didn't look forward to most of the events on her calendar. Nurse Margaret smiled, and Marilyn could see tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. She said, "The children have been so excited. We told them this morning and they've been watching the clock all day. Come with me. They're waiting." They walked together through the corridors of the hospital. The floors were linoleum, polished to a shine. The walls were painted a pale green, the color that hospitals always seem to favor. It was meant to be soothing, Marilyn supposed. The smell was familiar to anyone who has ever spent time in a hospital. Antiseptic, clean, with an undertone of something else. Illness, perhaps, or medicine, or simply the concentrated essence of human hope and suffering mixed together. Their footsteps echoed softly as they walked. They passed other nurses, orderlies, a doctor or two. Some did a double take when they saw Marilyn. Some whispered to each other, but they all had the good grace and professionalism to simply nod and smile and let her pass. Nurse Margaret explained as they waited for the elevator, "Our long-term care ward is on the 4th floor. We have 12 children there right now. Their ages range from 5 to 13. Some have been here for months. Some have been here for years. They have various conditions. Some will get better and go home. Some—" She paused, and Marilyn understood what she couldn't say. Some wouldn't. The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside. It was old and slow, groaning slightly as it carried them upward. Marilyn watched the numbers light up. 1, 2, 3, 4. The doors opened with a soft chime. The 4th floor was quieter than the lobby had been. Softer somehow. The lights were dimmed for the evening. Marilyn could hear the distant sound of a television from somewhere, the murmur of voices, a child crying softly, and then laughter, high and bright, the laughter of children. "They're in the common room," Nurse Margaret said. "We thought that would be better than trying to gather everyone in one of the rooms. More comfortable." The common room was at the end of the hall. As they approached, she could see through the open doorway. There were children sitting in chairs and wheelchairs. There were children in pajamas and robes. There were children with bandages and casts and IV poles. And every single one of them was looking toward the doorway with an expression of eager anticipation. Marilyn paused just outside the door. Her heart was pounding, not with nervousness exactly, but with emotion, with the sheer weight of the moment. She was Marilyn Monroe. She could walk onto a soundstage in front of hundreds of people and deliver a perfect performance. She could stand in front of thousands of fans and wave and smile, but this felt different. This felt important in a way that those things never quite did. She took a breath, put on her warmest smile, and walked into the room. The effect was immediate. The children's faces lit up like Christmas morning. Some gasped, some clapped their hands. One little girl, who couldn't have been more than 6, burst into tears of pure joy. "Hello, everyone," Marilyn said softly. "I'm so happy to be here with you tonight." The room erupted in greetings. "Hi, Miss Monroe. We love you. You're so pretty. You're really here." The voices tumbled over each other, each child wanting to be heard, wanting to make a connection with this magical creature who had stepped out of the movies and into their world. Nurse Margaret helped to settle them down, and Marilyn took a seat in the chair that had been set up for her. It was a simple wooden chair, positioned so that all the children could see her. Someone had thought to bring in extra pillows to make it more comfortable. She looked around the room, making eye contact with each child, really seeing them, really acknowledging them. She noticed a boy of about 10 with one leg in a cast elevated on a wheelchair. She noticed a girl of perhaps 8 with no hair, clearly undergoing chemotherapy. She noticed a tiny boy, so small he might have been 5 or even younger, with tubes running into his nose. She noticed all of them, and she loved them. In that instant, she loved every single one of them with a fierce, protective love that surprised her with its intensity. She said, "I brought some books," and she reached for her shopping bag. "I wasn't sure what you might like to hear, so I brought a few different ones. What do you think? Should we read a story together?" The chorus of yeses was unanimous. She pulled out the books one by one, showing them the covers. When she held up the Velveteen Rabbit, she saw several children lean forward with interest. "This one?" she asked. "Yes," they chorused. She settled back into her chair, the book in her lap, and opened to the first page. The room grew quiet. Even the child who had been crying earlier was silent now, watching her with wide eyes. "There was once a Velveteen Rabbit," Marilyn began, her voice soft
and warm. "And in the beginning, he was really splendid." As she read, something magical happened. The hospital fell away. The IV poles and the wheelchairs and the bandages all faded into the background. There was only the story. There was only her voice, rising and falling with the narrative, bringing the characters to life. There were only the children, their faces rapt with attention, their imaginations carrying them away to a world where toys could become real through the power of love. Marilyn read slowly, carefully, making sure to show the pictures to each child. She used different voices for different characters. She made the Skin Horse sound wise and kind. She made the Velveteen Rabbit sound young and hopeful. She put her whole heart into it. When she reached the part where the rabbit asks what it means to be real, she felt her own throat tighten with emotion. "Real isn't how you are made," said the Skin Horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." She paused, looking up from the book. Some of the children were crying softly, but they were good tears, tears of understanding, tears of recognition, because these children knew about being real. They knew about being loved, or perhaps painfully, about not being loved, about being forgotten. "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the Skin Horse, for he was always truthful. "When you are real, you don't mind being hurt." Marilyn's voice was barely above a whisper now. The words felt so heavy, so true, so profound. She continued reading, through the rabbit's transformation from a toy to a real rabbit, through the magic that happened because a child had loved him so much, through the beautiful, bittersweet ending where the rabbit realizes that love has changed him forever. When she finished, she closed the book gently and looked around the room. There wasn't a dry eye, including hers, including Nurse Margaret's, who was standing by the door. "Thank you," whispered a small voice. Marilyn looked and saw it was the little girl who had cried when she first entered. "Thank you for reading to us." "Oh, sweetheart," Marilyn said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for letting me." She stayed for 2 more hours. She read 3 more books. She talked with each child individually, learning their names, hearing their stories. She held hands. She gave hugs. She signed autographs on anything they could find, cast, hospital gowns, pieces of paper torn from notebooks. But more than that, she listened. She listened to a boy named Timothy talk about his dog at home that he missed desperately. She listened to a girl named Sarah describe the garden her mother had planted before she got sick. She listened to a tiny boy named James whisper about the nightmares he had and how scared he was. And to James, she whispered back, "I get scared too sometimes. Everyone does. But you know what I do? I think about all the people who love me. I think about all the good things in the world. I think about stories like the one we just read. And I remember that love is the most powerful magic there is. Do you believe in magic?" James nodded solemnly. "Good," Marilyn said, touching his cheek gently, "because the magic believes in you." When it was finally time to leave, when Nurse Margaret gently reminded her that the children needed their rest, there were protests and pleas for her to stay. But Marilyn promised she would come back, and she meant it. She would come back, as often as she could, as often as they would let her. She hugged each child goodbye. She left the wrapped books for them to share. And as she walked back down the corridor with Nurse Margaret, she felt something she hadn't felt in a really long time. She felt useful. She felt needed. She felt real. "You have no idea what this meant to them," Nurse Margaret said as they waited for the elevator. "Some of those children never have visitors. Never. Their families are too far away or too busy or too heartbroken to see them like this. You gave them something tonight that they'll remember for the rest of their lives." Marilyn shook her head. "They gave me something," she said. "They reminded me why any of this matters." She drove home slowly through the Los Angeles night. The party would still be going on probably. People would have noticed her absence by now. There would be questions, there would be gossip, there would be photographers wanting to know where Marilyn Monroe had disappeared to. But she didn't care. She thought about James and his nightmares. She thought about Sarah and her mother's garden. She thought about Timothy and his dog. She thought about all of them, those beautiful, brave children, fighting battles that most adults couldn't imagine. And she thought about the Velveteen Rabbit, about becoming real, about how love can transform you. She understood now, perhaps better than ever before, that fame didn't make you real. Money didn't make you real. Beauty didn't make you real. Only love did. Only caring for others. Only connecting heart to heart with another human being who needed you. That night, she went home to her quiet house. She washed her face and brushed her hair and changed into her nightgown. She looked at herself in the mirror. The same face that had launched 1,000 magazine covers, the same face that had smiled for movie screens around the world. But tonight, she saw something different. Tonight, she saw someone who had mattered, someone who had made a difference, someone who was real. You know, she continued to visit that hospital for years, not just once, not just for publicity, but regularly, quietly, without fanfare, without photographers. She would slip in during the evening hours after her work was done, and she would read to the children. She would talk with them. She would hold them when they cried. She would celebrate with them when they got good news. She would mourn with them when they lost friends from the ward. And the staff at St. Mary's came to know her not as Marilyn Monroe, movie star, but as Marilyn, the lady who came to read stories, the lady who remembered everyone's names, the lady who brought books and sometimes stuffed animals, the lady who cared. Word of her visits spread slowly through the Hollywood community, though she never spoke of them publicly. Other stars began to follow her example. Other celebrities began to remember that they had the power to bring joy, to bring hope, to bring light into dark places. But Marilyn never did it for recognition. She did it because she knew what it meant to be that child, the one who was waiting, the one who was hoping, the one who needed someone to care. Years later, after she had left this world far too soon, after the headlines had screamed their sensational stories and the world had mourned the loss of an icon,
Nurse Margaret was interviewed by a local newspaper. She was asked about Marilyn Monroe, asked what she remembered. And Nurse Margaret said this, and I want you to hear it, to really hear it, because it matters. She said, "The world remembers her as a movie star. We remember her as an angel. The world remembers her beauty. We remember her kindness. The world remembers her fame. We remember her love. She gave those children something that no medicine could provide. She gave them joy. She gave them hope. She gave them the feeling that they mattered, that they were seen, that they were loved. And in doing so, she showed all of us what it truly means to be a star. Not the lights and the cameras and the glamour, but the ability to shine light into darkness, to bring warmth to cold places, to make people feel less alone. That is who Marilyn Monroe was. Not the troubled starlet that the tabloids loved to write about, not the symbol of sexuality that society wanted to reduce her to. She was a woman with a heart that was almost too big for this world, a woman who had known pain and loneliness and fear, and who had transformed those experiences into compassion, into empathy, into love. She understood that fame was a tool, not a destination. She understood that beauty was a gift, but only if you used it to bring beauty into other people's lives. She understood that the cameras and the parties and the glamour were just the surface, that real life, meaningful life, happened in the quiet moments, in the hospital rooms, in the simple act of reading a story to a child who had no one. Tonight, as I finish this story, I want you to think about something. I want you to think about the ways in which we remember people. We remember achievements. We remember scandals. We remember the public persona. But how often do we remember the small kindnesses, the private generosities, the moments when someone chose compassion over convenience? Marilyn Monroe left this world on August 5th, 1962. She was only 36 years old. Far too young, far too soon. The world lost her light before it had fully learned to appreciate the warmth it provided. But here's what I believe, and I believe it with my whole heart. I believe that her truest legacy isn't in the films, as wonderful as they are. It isn't in the photographs, as beautiful as she was.
Her truest legacy is in the hearts of the children she touched, in the lives she changed, in the hope she provided, in the love she gave so freely, expecting nothing in return. Those children grew up. They had children of their own. They told the story of the night that Marilyn Monroe came to read them stories. They passed down the lesson that she taught them, the lesson that love is the most powerful magic there is, that caring for others is what makes us real. And so her light continues to shine, not from a movie screen, not from a magazine cover, but from the inside out, from heart to heart, from generation to generation. If you could have said one thing to her back then, when she was still here, when she was still reading to those children and giving so much of herself, what would it be? What would you want her to know? Would you tell her that she was loved? Would you tell her that she mattered? Would you tell her that the world saw not just the beauty, but the beautiful soul within? I think about that often. I think about all the kind words we save for funerals and eulogies, all the appreciation we wait to express until it's too late, all the love we assume people know without us having to say it. And I think that maybe, just maybe, the best way we can honor Marilyn Monroe's memory is to learn from her example, to use whatever gifts we have been given, whatever platform we have been granted, whatever time we have been allotted to bring light into someone else's darkness, to read a story to a child who has no one, to visit someone who is lonely, to see the people that society overlooks, to care about the ones who feel invisible. That is how we make her sacrifice, her pain, her struggles mean something. That is how we ensure that she didn't suffer in vain. We become, in our own small ways, the light that she was. We become real through loving others. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, as you think about the story I've told you, I want you to make a promise, not to me, not even to Marilyn's memory, but to yourself. Promise that you will look for one opportunity this week to bring joy to someone who needs it, to show kindness to someone who doesn't expect it, to give a moment of your time to someone who feels forgotten. Because that's what she would have wanted. That's what she did. That's who she was. Not just a movie star, not just an icon, not just a beautiful face on a screen. She was Marilyn Monroe. She was Norma Jean. She was a woman who slipped away from a glamorous party to read stories to children who had no one. And in doing so, she showed us all what it truly means to be a star. Rest in peace, dear Marilyn. Your light still shines. Your love still matters. You are still and will always be real. This has been a special report from Starlight News Network. I'm your anchor, and it has been my honor to share this story with you tonight. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for caring. Join us next week as we remember another Hollywood legend, Jimmy Stewart, and the day he quietly used his fame to save a small-town theater from closing, giving an entire community back their dreams. Until then, be kind to one another, hold your loved ones close, and remember, the truest stars are the ones who use their light to help others shine. Good night, and God bless.